In this courtroom, there is one phrase I hear more than any other. It wasn't me. Day after day, case after case, people stand before this bench and try to shift the blame. They blame the weather. They blame the traffic signs. They blame other drivers, bad luck, or misunderstandings. It's human nature, I suppose, to protect yourself, to avoid consequences, to push guilt somewhere else. But every once in a while, someone walks in who does the exact opposite. Someone who doesn't run. Someone who doesn't lie. Someone who doesn't hide. And on one cold Tuesday morning, a man walked into my courtroom and said 4 words that silenced everyone in the room. It was my fault. His name was Thomas. No last name on the booking sheet. No fixed address. Just one word. Homeless. The charges were serious. Vandalism, destruction of property, disorderly conduct. According to the police report, he had thrown a brick through the front window of a small neighborhood store, Sal's Market, at exactly 2:15 a.m., but that wasn't the part that stood out. What stood out was what he did next. He didn't run, he didn't hide, he didn't even try. He sat down on the curb, pulled his knees to his chest, and waited for the police to arrive. When Officer Miller pulled up, Thomas raised his hands before the officer even stepped out of the car and calmly said, "I'm the one you want. It was my fault." Before taking the bench, I reviewed the security footage. It was raining that night. Cold rain, the kind that soaks through your bones. The video showed Thomas pacing back and forth outside the store for nearly 10 minutes. Not angry, not reckless, just conflicted, like a man arguing with himself. Then finally he bent down, picked up a loose brick from a nearby construction pile, closed his eyes for a moment, and threw it. Glass shattered. The alarm screamed. And Thomas? He didn't move. He just sat down and waited. When he walked into my courtroom, something shifted. You could feel it. He was small, thin, worn down by life. His coat was too big, patched together with duct tape and safety pins. His shoes didn't match, but his posture, straight, his eyes, clear, tired beyond words, but honest. He didn't look at the floor like most defendants. He looked directly at me. "The case of the city versus Thomas," the clerk announced. Thomas stepped forward. He didn't wait, didn't hesitate, didn't look for a lawyer. He leaned into the microphone and said calmly, "It was my fault, Your Honor. I did it. I'm guilty." That's when I knew this wasn't going to be a normal case. "Why?" I asked. It's the simplest question in the world, and yet it's the one people struggle with the most. The courtroom went silent. Everyone leaned in, waiting, expecting an excuse, a lie, a story. But what came out instead was the truth. "It was cold, Your Honor." His voice cracked slightly. "Tuesday night, it was 15 degrees. The wind, it cut right through me." He tightened his coat as if he could still feel it. "I tried the shelters. All of them. Full. Every single one." He swallowed. "I sat in an alley for hours. Around 1 a.m. I stopped shivering." He looked up at me then, fear in his eyes. That's when I knew I was in trouble. Anyone who's ever studied hypothermia knows when you stop shivering, your body is shutting down. You don't feel cold anymore. You just fall asleep, and you don't wake up. "So you broke the window," I said slowly. "So you'd get arrested." Thomas nodded. "I knew the alarm would bring the police. I knew they'd take me somewhere warm." He paused. "They give you a sandwich in the holding cell. It's not good, but it's warm." A faint, almost embarrassed smile crossed his face. I figured a broken window is better than a frozen body. You could hear a pin drop in that courtroom. Even Officer Miller, a man who had seen everything, looked down at the floor. This wasn't a criminal. This was a man trying to survive the night. And then came the part that changed everything. Thomas wasn't always homeless. He wasn't always broken. He had a life, a job, a home, a wife named Sarah. He worked as a machinist for 30 years until the factory closed. Then his wife got sick. Cancer. He sold everything trying to save her. The house, the savings, every last dollar, and in the end, he lost her anyway. "And when she died," he said quietly, "I didn't have anything left." No anger, no bitterness, just emptiness. That's how a man ends up on the street, not overnight, not because he's lazy, but because life slowly takes everything. Then something unexpected happened. The store owner, Sal, stood up, the man whose window had been shattered, the man who had every right to demand payment. He looked at Thomas long and hard, then he said, "I don't want a dime." And just like that, mercy entered the room. But the law still remained, and I had a decision to make. If I sent Thomas to jail, he'd be warm, but he'd have a criminal record, his future destroyed. If I released him, he'd be free, but he might not survive the night. It was a choice between survival and a second chance. So I chose something else. I pulled out my personal checkbook, wrote a check for $500, and handed it to Officer Miller. "Take him somewhere warm," I said. "Not a cell, a room." The entire courtroom froze. No one had ever seen anything like it. Thomas tried to refuse. "I can't take charity," he said. "It's not charity," I told him. "It's an investment." 2 weeks. That's all I gave him. 2 weeks to rebuild his life. And he did. 3 weeks later, he came back. But not as the same man. He was clean, standing tall, wearing fresh clothes, holding a job, holding a lease, holding his life back in his hands. And then, something even more powerful happened. His daughter walked into that courtroom. The daughter who thought she had lost him forever. The daughter who had been searching for him for 2 years. Dad. And just like that, a broken man became a father again. The charges were dismissed. The case was closed. But the story, it stayed. Because sometimes, justice isn't about punishment. It's about seeing the person behind the mistake. Thomas walked in as a man who broke a window. He walked out as a man who rebuilt his life. And all it took was $500, a little trust, and the courage to listen when someone says, "It was my fault."